Coming up on AbiliTV, we're shining a light on autism.
What is autism and how does it affect people differently?
We'll break it all down and take a deep dive into the National Autism Strategy with a panel of experts to find out what it really means for the community.
We also meet a musician who proves that autism is no barrier to success in the music industry. And we have an in-studio performance from his band, Favorite Kid.
Plus, our guest host is Autism Queensland Ambassador Amber Tomlinson.
Welcome to AbiliTV.
Welcome to a very special episode of AbiliTV, where we're shining a spotlight on autism, what it is, how it affects people differently, and what the new National Autism Strategy, or NAS short, means for the community.
We have an important conversation ahead, and we're thrilled to be joined by a very special guest host. She's an Autism Queensland Ambassador, a passionate advocate, and someone who's making a real impact in the autism community. Please welcome Amber Tomlinson.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm so thrilled to be here, especially as I'm such a big fan of AbiliTV and being a previous guest. It's even better coming back as a co-host, so thank you so much.
You are welcome.
Thank you. And as someone who works closely with the autism community, I know how important it is to have these conversations and to make sure autistic voices are heard.
We also want to take a moment to thank our audience for tuning in. Whether you're watching it on C31 in Melbourne, Channel 44 in Adelaide, or streaming us on CTV Plus or on YouTube, we appreciate your support.
Before we dive into the National Autism Strategy, let's take a moment to talk about autism itself. It's a term most people have heard, but there's still a lot of misunderstanding.
And the truth is, autism isn't a one-size-fits-all experience, it's a spectrum. And not everyone experiences it the same. We experience it differently.
Autism isn't a look to be defined by. Autism is a lifelong complex neurological development disability with characteristics that vary greatly from person to person on the spectrum. It can develop, change and improve over time, potentially impacting age and cognitive ability on how the characteristics of autism present themselves. As with all people, every autistic person is unique and has their own individual diversity, capacity, experiences and aspirations, especially in young women like me who are autistic but don't present as autistic.
For me, social situations can be sometimes tricky, especially picking up on certain social cues. But at the same time, I find comfort in routine and structure, and that helps me stay focused and get things done.
And then there's the myth that all autistic people are the same. We're not. Some of us are more verbal, some are non-verbal, some love socializing, others prefer their own space. Autism is just a different way of experiencing the world.
So with all these different experiences in mind, it's clear why one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. That's why the National Autism Strategy is so important. But what is it? Let's take a look. Australia has introduced its first ever National Autism Strategy, a 7-year plan aimed at creating a more inclusive and supportive society for autistic people.
Well, the strategy focuses on 4 key areas: social inclusion, economic inclusion, diagnosis services and support, health and mental health.
The government has allocated $42.3 million to kick off the strategy.
There's $19.9 million to fund peer-led support networks, $12.2 million to turn autism research into useful tools and guidance, $3.7 million to review and improve existing support programs, $2.8 million to better understand how many Australians are autistic, $915,000 to promote awareness and community acceptance, and $445,000 to create new resources for autistic people and their families before and after diagnosis.
What it does, it sets out a vision of how we make Australia a more inclusive place for autistic people. How do we make sure that they are socially included, economically included, that their journey before and after diagnosis is a better experience, and of course their health and mental health is improved.
The US, UK and Canada have all introduced similar strategies.
And now, Australia is taking its first steps.
So now we're going to break it down further and discuss what the strategy really means. To help us do that, please welcome Rebecca McCash from Aspect and Amber McGregor from Autism Queensland. Thank you so much for coming here, ladies. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
No, of course, absolutely. So, Amber, I'd like to start with you. What are your initial thoughts on the strategy?
Well, it's finally here. We've waited a very long time, and it is the first step to creating a more inclusive world for autistic people. We know that autistic people face higher rates of unemployment, exclusion from education and mental health challenges, and we know that these are the core areas the National Autism Strategy is going to focus on, which is just incredibly exciting because we need to face these head on. And it's going to ensure that the needs and views of autistic people are included and are informing our society across the nation and in Queensland. And the co-design strategy is what is quite exciting. So, and it's committed to creating a systemic long-term change for our society, our communities, and overall the inclusion of autistic people.
Amazing, that's incredible. And such a great input as well.
Yeah.
I love that, amazing. And Rebecca, you had the opportunity to contribute to the strategy as well. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. I was really honoured to be able to take part in the strategy as a member of one of the working groups. I think to have a strategy like this is just such a monumentous achievement and a reflection of the advocacy of autistic Australians and their families and support networks. It was really humbling to stand on the shoulders of people who have stood up and fought for and demanded a better world for autistic people. What excites me so much about this strategy is that it is a strategy that was written by us. It's a reflection of our needs in our own words, and I think that that is just something that is so unbelievably powerful. To see terms like affirming and the recognition of the value of peer support, lived experience and co-design at this kind of national level is something that I hope will ultimately trickle down into the rest of society and lead to better schools and environments and workplaces for autistic people. And I think this time it's not meaningful inclusion in terms of politicians or doctors. It's meaningful in terms of what meaningful means to autistic people and what's meaningful for us. And that, you know, is almost just as, if not more powerful than the strategy itself.
Oh, 100%. And even having our autistic community's input and have their voices actually heard through that strategy as well is just so impacting, and if not a powerful, positive weapon. Because, you know, in a sense, we all have our own superpower as well and are so unique. And I feel like having our contribution to that is adding a major superpower all in one text.
All in itself.
100%. Now, I believe, Brandon, you had a question.
Why, yes, that I do. What excites you about the strategy?
Well, it's the social inclusion that really, really excites me. The area is really challenging the unconscious bias and starting to shift perspectives at a fundamental level, which is needed in across the nation and in Queensland. We need to have a better understanding about the diversity of autism, and this strategy is really positioning us to do that. By the ability to address these biases head on, we can make that shift, and we can make it as a nation, which is ultimately what we need. We do need to start with co-design, and we do need to collaborate with autistic people and the autism community to enact this change. And I suppose through that co-design, seeing that the strategy was co-designed in the first place really sets us up for success. And that's what's exciting, and to see the action plans coming through, with one already being released. That co-design and that collaboration with autistic people need to continue to have that strategy embedded in our society.
Absolutely, and that's key word, co-design as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree on that one, Emma.
Amazing.
I agree.
I agree as well. What are the biggest changes or improvements to the strategy that aims to bring for autistic people in Australia?
So my dream, what I really hope, is that all of the opportunities that have been identified within the strategy, the areas of improvement, I guess, are opportunities that are given to autistic people. So there's so many autistic business owners, people working in media, people working across different areas of society, teachers, researchers, doctors even. And these are people that should be able to get those opportunities to design these solutions for autistic people, because what this can then lead to is not just better solutions and programs and services for autistic people, but also an investment into employment opportunities for autistic people through those businesses.
Some definitely valuable insights there, but the big question is, how will it actually be implemented? We'll find out next.
Still to come on AbiliTV, we have an in-studio performance from Favourite Kid.
But up next, our panel will unpack how the National Autism Strategy will be implemented and what role the wider community can play. This is AbiliTV.
Hi, I'm Daniel from the Sunshine Coast, and you're watching AbiliTV.
Whether you're watching us on community television or streaming us online, we really appreciate you tuning into AbiliTV. If you're not following us on social media, just scan the QR code and it's going to pop up with a bunch of links that will take you through to our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, as well as our Instagram and TikTok accounts. Then it's just a case of tapping subscribe, like, or follow, and we can keep in touch.
For those of you just joining us, we're shining a light on autism and unpacking the National Autism Strategy.
We're joined in the studio by a panel of experts who are helping us understand this tragedy. And our guest host is Autism Queensland Ambassador, Emma Tomlinson.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. I'm so thrilled to be back, and music has always been a powerful way for people to express themselves, and for many autistic musicians like myself, it can be a way to connect with the world in a way that words sometimes can't. One artist who knows this all too well is my dear friend Aspy Jones. Aspy is an incredible singer-songwriter who's using his music to share his experiences with autism. In this next story, we'll hear about his journey, the challenges he's faced, and how his unique perspective shapes his sound. Let's take a look.
Autism is a huge spectrum, where someone is non-verbal to someone who is highly functioning.
As you've grown as a person, you've decided that your autism doesn't necessarily define you.
One of the songs that we play is called Hush, and it's all about compassion and empathy. And those are things that you learn when you have autism. You have to learn to be empathetic to other people. So you can only imagine when you're dating how important those things are. Hi, I'm Ethan.
My name's Saul.
I'm Jamie.
And we're Favourite Kid. He's walking around looking for his inspiration. He finds a new one every day.
This interview making you feel in somehow uncomfortable, or talk about this?
I think this is it's a good question, because I had no problem. I had no problem with the interview itself. I had no problem with talking about it, but with having the furniture moved around, that is in the back of my mind, just kind of like like just scratching that I'm gonna have to move it all back. I'm so used to talking about having autism and being on the spectrum, but when we moved the stuff for the interview, I do like to have things happen as my expectations see them.
He knows that furniture has to be moved, so out of all the furniture in the house, which one would make him the least uncomfortable?
The average person would be able to just be like, oh yeah, we'll move these chairs, we'll move all this, and it'll be fine. But is one of the challenges of having autism. Yes, I'm moving it back. I'm moving it back. Dating for me is a challenge. Human connection right at the start when you have autism, it doesn't come as naturally. I'm currently seeing someone, it is hard because my memory is probably it's probably the most prevalent factor, where I'm kind of just forgetting dates, forgetting stuff that we've talked about.
When Ethan first started dating, when he was, a teenager and a young adult, he couldn't quite grasp the thought that the romantic movies were different than real life. Paying rent really makes you think about how much money you should be spending on a bunch of flowers. Yeah, but I think having autism, he just couldn't understand why the girls weren't reacting the same as they did in the movies and why they weren't swept off their feet. And instead they were a little bit turned off and wouldn't answer his calls. His inspiration, he finds a new one every day. With his dreams pell dashed, he is holy. Music, it's funny because there's a lot of things in music that would make you uncomfortable. Like you said, the crowds, the bright lights, the noise, all of those things, they do kind of add up to be a recipe for disaster for someone on the spectrum, but when the music starts, it just kind of washes away, and it's just extremely therapeutic. And I found that writing music was just like self-therapy. And it was a great way for me to be an advocate and spread awareness for people with autism that were on the stage and the music industry. But I know more than I did before.
He's a super talented artist and soon will be joined in the studio by his band, Favourite Kid. But as you can see, autism comes in all shapes and sizes. So how does the National Autism Strategy work for everyone? And what changes might we start seeing? We're joined in the studio by Rebecca McCash from Aspect and Amber McGregor from Autism Queensland, who are helping us unpack the 76-page document. Thanks so much for being here, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
No, of course. And I cannot believe how big the strategy is, 76 pages.
Well, that's just one of 3 almost 70-page documents.
Wow.
Yes, so we have our National Autism Strategy, as well as the action plan for the first year, as well as the national roadmap to improve the health and mental health of autistic people. So it's a lot.
It is. It's so much to unpack, and that's exactly why we're here today, which is incredible. Now, before the break, we talked about how the strategy was designed and what's in it, but where do we go from there? Amber, what do you see as next steps for the National Autism Strategy, and what are the priorities?
So, as Rebecca's mentioned, it's a national plan, but only one action plan has been released. So it's quite a pivotal moment in our history, which I get really excited about because we are part of changing this. We are part of shaping our future in the country and creating more inclusive communities, inclusive practices and inclusive organisations. So, but there's a lot of work to still be done. And when I talk about an inclusive future, to quote from the strategy, it's a future where everyone has the opportunity to participate fully in our society, which is that pivotal point that we need to turn, embrace and lean into and really enact change with these action plans. So the first one is out and we see really big actions, and we see the lead government agencies who and departments who are involved. And we also see the existing work that the government is doing in that action plan. However, we know there's so much more work to be done. So implementation of plans is essential to create long-term and sustainable outcomes to improve inclusive communities for autistic people. But it's just the beginning of the journey, so we do have to wait to see what happens.
Absolutely, and I feel like we're only scratching the surface so much that it's really starting to make a change that we haven't seen in decades, and I feel like that's such a positive outcome in implementing that as well. Now, Fran, I believe you have a question for Amber and Rebecca.
A lot of people who watch our show don't live in capital cities. Do you think the strategy is as accessible and used in practice in regional areas where things aren't as accessible?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Fran. So whilst the strategy addresses the notion of a geographically sparse nation, so we know Australia is really geographically sparse across the country, but it's the action plans that we need to see that outline how that strategy is going to be implemented in these remote areas and our regional areas. Consideration needs to be given at a state level for those action plans to be implemented, and every state and territory is geographically different. So it's really essential those action plans consult, collaborate and work with those communities to really address and roll out the strategy in those areas to meet the needs of autistic people in those communities and the autism community. So it all comes back to co-design and collaboration.
Absolutely.
Definitely. I think there are a couple of mentions within the action plans about regional communities specifically, but it doesn't yet quite go into the detail of exactly what that's going to look like. And I think it's really, really important that we continue to explore that because, as you say, you know, all of these communities are so diverse, and within these communities we have so many different cultures and identities, and I think that this is why intersectionality is going to be absolutely key to successfully implementing the strategy. I definitely think it's a plan right now. The strategy is a plan, and hopefully we can start to see some real changes coming through in the actual implementation of that plan.
Great, 100%. And as an advocate for young women and girls on the autism spectrum, how will the strategy improve minimising the substantial disadvantages of misconceptions and assist autistic women, girls and gender diverse people who are misdiagnosed, delayed diagnosis or have symptoms dismissed as well in the community?
Yeah, I think it's about, I'll pass to Rebecca in a minute, but really reducing stigma.
Yes.
Raising awareness,
yes,
and really breaking down the social constructs and perceptions of autistic women, and ensuring that the access to supports and services are informed by autistic women for autistic women.
Exactly.
Rebecca, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, as an autistic woman, late diagnosed, I spent my younger life, my teenage years, with multiple different diagnoses, going through lots and lots of different types of treatment, and I had a really, really rough time because I didn't get that diagnosis until I was 26. And it's interesting because I have a younger brother, Sam, who I adore. He is my favorite human being in the whole world. He was diagnosed as a child. And because he got that diagnosis, he was able to put systems and processes in place to support himself, which I didn't necessarily have. And it was really because Sam was born a boy. That's the reason that he got that diagnosis, and I had to wait much, much longer because research historically has been on boys. It has not been looking at women or gender diverse people or people of different cultures. And I really think that, I really hope that this strategy will contribute to just making it more known that autism doesn't have a certain look. Autism can happen in anyone, and I really hope that there are young women out there that don't have to struggle for as long as perhaps I did.
No, exactly. And I was the same as well. Like, my brother was diagnosed before I was, and then it wasn't seen until after his diagnosis that Emma's also on the spectrum, and that was in the same year 6 months later. No, in the next year after that. And I believe it's so incredible to know that, you know, we are such strong maskers to a point where we should actually win Actors Award.
I think so.
I think
we
so.
deserve it.
I think we do, or an Oscar.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it's just so seen in everyday, you know, life, no matter where you are in Australia, that so many women are getting so late diagnosed because of how well we mask our symptoms. And it's just because of cognition ability to learn to adapt. And I think that's a really big thing in our community with women on the spectrum.
Yeah, I also think that it's great that young women are starting to see women like yourself out in the world, role models to look up to, but also I spent such a long time thinking that I just thought like an autistic person, but I wasn't autistic, which is crazy because that's autism.
Yeah. To a T.
That is it. But because I didn't present on the outside in ways that I had seen in media, I had seen just in life generally, I didn't believe that I could be autistic. And so I didn't seek support or a diagnosis for such a long time.
Wow.
Yeah. And I believe I have a question for you guys. How does the strategy specifically support young autistic and neurodiverse adults, especially those aged 18 to 24 and 25 to 34?
So I think it's under the economic inclusion area that we're seeing stronger commitments to not only education opportunities for autistic adults, but that commitment to improving awareness with employers and organisations and the workplace. So that's that real key, is that we should be, the action plan is really focusing in on supporting employers and the workplace to improve understanding, knowledge and awareness of autism. And it's really important to ensure that workplaces, their systems and staff are inclusive and that autistic people can gain employment and thrive in that employment. So I see that as a real point of difference of the action plan to specifically supporting adolescents and adults as they move through to employment. Rebecca, did you have anything to add?
I guess just coming off of you mentioning a lot of the strategies around supporting education in employers and in the community. And I think that's one massive strength of it, just generally speaking. It's not necessarily a strategy that's looking at how do we, you know, fix autistic people. It's more how do we support the rest of the world to be more inclusive for autistic people so that we can just be. So yeah, that was not specific to young people, but for young people specifically, yes. I think there's a lot of mention of the difficulties in transition. So transitioning from school into further education, from school into employment. And I do think that this is an area where many people sort of fall off the support cliff. The edge of the support cliff, I think, is what it's referred to. Sort of young people leaving school and they just don't have anywhere to go. I definitely realized that this is a large problem for young people that I support. They are often leaving school earlier, perhaps, sometimes at 16, sometimes at 18, but there seems to be a real gap for this like 18 to 21, 18 to 25 mark where these young people aren't quite ready to go into employment yet, but it doesn't mean that they can't go into mainstream employment, and there just doesn't seem to be any supports for this area of life and this transition out of school. So I really hope that the strategy can do some work in this area, really put in some supports for young people so that they can achieve all of the amazing things that we know that they can.
No, 100%. And it's about also breaking that stereotype of the system, you know, and actually going above the system to ensure that the system is so inclusive and implementing that strategy as well. So that way people who are incredible at what they do in their skill set, they are seen in employment, but in education, but also in everyday life, especially with dating for young people as well, and being able to socialise in community. And I think that's a really big, important goal for those age groups to be able to succeed in all those parts of life, really. 100%.
Yeah, I agree on that one too.
Oh, amazing. Alrighty, and Rebecca, you contributed to the strategy's development, so I feel this is a question for you, best directed. The action plan only runs until 2026, with future plans depending on feedback and results from this phase. Do you think that's a solid approach, or is there a risk things could stall after that?
Something that we advocated really strongly for when we were working on the strategy was the continued involvement of autistic people throughout the entire lifespan of the strategy. So the strategy is, I believe, 7-year strategy. I may actually have that wrong. But the action plan is just for 1 year. And so there will be further action plans.
Okay,
I
great.
do think that it's really important that we maintain this momentum.
Absolutely.
And don't just come to a place where the strategy is a really pretty document on a shelf.
Yes.
We really need actual meaningful change and really strong accountability. I think this is a real opportunity for government or corporates to change the trajectory of many autistic people lives and autistic business owners and employees through thoughtful and deliberate procurement practices that not only deliver on excellent outcomes for autistic people, but help to support the economic health of those businesses as well.
So what role does the community play in making the National Autism Strategy a success, and how can people get involved? Especially our viewers who watch AbiliTV.
Yeah, I think it's keeping the dialogue going. As you said, we're all in this, and we need to keep the momentum going. We need to keep the conversations going. We can all take part of implementation of the strategy and take ownership of those action plans, whether it be in our workplaces, our schools, or just even in our daily lives, to really be committing to this. Seeking out more information. Yes, there is 3 big documents to read, but there are some really great easy read versions as well to really get that curious mind going. So accessing that and accessing services that really advocate, identify and embed inclusion in those services because that's going to create that change. And overall, that continuation of co-design, connecting and collaborating with autistic people to inform these action plans and inform services to carry this through is really important.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot that the wider community can do to contribute to the success of the strategy. It's currently estimated 1 in 40 Australians are autistic. It's around 1.1% of the population, I hear. However, 45% of autistic people are living in poverty because they are unemployed. 97% of autistic people are reporting facing educational restrictions. And autistic people are, unfortunately and very sadly, 7 times more likely to die by suicide. This is shocking and unacceptable, and we all have a responsibility to change these statistics. I would recommend that everyone take the time to read the hundreds of pages of the document of the strategy, because there is such amazing, helpful, up-to-date information that autistic people have provided ourselves. And I think that particularly employers, teachers have a really big responsibility and an enormous part to play in the successful implementation of the strategy. Hire autistic people, consider using autistic-led businesses. If you're training people on autism and neurodiversity, consider bringing autistic people into those discussions. And I think ultimately only time will tell what this strategy is going to actually mean for the autistic community and for the people that support us. I hope that it has the sweeping system-wide impact that it sets out to achieve. Cautiously optimistic. But this is just really the very first step. It's a plan. And now the real work begins.
That's it. And it's almost like a social experiment, going back to my last question, that we hope to continue on as a proper plan in place that you can have access to going into even 2032 onwards as well. So thank you so much, ladies. This is such a powerful discussion, and I'd love to get your final thoughts right after this.
Still to come on AbiliTV, a panel of experts share their final thoughts on the National Autism Strategy.
What up next? Our in-studio performance from Favorite Kid. This is AbiliTV. Earlier in the show, we shared the inspiring story of Aspy Jones, an incredibly talented musician using his platform to raise awareness about autism through his music.
But now, we're excited to introduce his band Favorite Kid, a group made up of Aspy alongside his siblings, Jamie and Saul.
Their music celebrates neurodiversity, and they are smashing the indie folk and pop music scene, performing their original song, I Know More. Please welcome Favorite Kid.
I've not been around for a long time. I'm naive on days that end in wine. A couple of mistakes when I kept score, but I know more than I did before. I've had my fair share of heartbreak. I wish I'd known it for the early days. It doesn't really matter if you're rich or poor, but I know more than I did before. And let it serve your mind. Go out there and make your own mistakes. You'll learn a lot quicker if you do it that way. Only this life, skin on mine. Can't recall what it is I was crying for, but I know more than I did before. If you're not happy, something needs to change, 'cause life's too short for a pity wage. Do what you love and life's never a chore, but I know more than I did before. And then it serve your mind. Go out there and make your own mistakes. You'll learn a lot quicker if you do it that way. Only this life, skin on mine. Can't recall what it is I was crying for, but I know more than I did before. To learn a lesson is a simple proposition. Where you get a situation and you split it down the middle. You're hurting, it means you're learning. I know it hurts, but you won't die. You won't die. Can't recall what it is I was crying for, but I know more than I did before. And even though you might be feeling great, there are people around you who aren't okay. That's how they are for no reason at all. And you might learn more than you did before. And then it serve your mind. Go out there and make your own mistakes. You'll learn a lot quicker if you do it that way. Only this life, skin on mine. Skin on mine. Can't recall what it is I was crying for, but I know more than I did before. Recall what it is I was crying for, but I know more than I did before.
Amazing stuff, Favorite Kid. make sure you follow them on social media so you can listen to their music and find out when they are performing next.
Before we wrap up, let's turn back to our panel. We've been discussing the National Autism Strategy and what it means for individuals on the spectrum, their families, and the broader community. Final thoughts, ladies?
I think we're both really excited. For Autism Queensland, we're incredibly excited to see the national strategy roll out, their first action plan released, and really ready for implementation and ready and committed to seeing that through with the autism community.
Yeah, I think I'm just really excited. Just really excited to see the change that this strategy can bring about for autistic Australians. I think, you know, there are so many incredible autistic people in Australia, and just really excited to see what the world looks like when everyone gets the opportunity to be meaningfully included.
It's been a pleasure having you and also sharing your thoughts on this new strategy that we can't wait to have out as accessible as it can be as well. So thank you so much, Rebecca from Aspy and Amber from Autism Queensland.
Thank you.
And a special thanks to our guest host, Amber Tomlinson.
Thank you so much, Rose, for having me. Once again, it is such a pleasure, and as well to be representing autism in Australia currently and having these conversations. It's so important, and it makes me even more passionate for what's to come.
Thanks, Emma. If you have a story to share or like to be part of the show, reach out to us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, and share our show. Spread the word and inspire someone today.
And remember, we all have the ability to inspire and make a difference.
See you next time.
AbiliTV is produced by Trending Media Australia in partnership with Rope. Rope is a disability service organisation providing opportunities to people living with intellectual disabilities to learn media skills by participating in the creation of AbiliTV, including hosting and the show's production. If you'd like to be involved or become a sponsor of AbiliTV, we'd love to hear from you. Just go to abilitv.com.au.